judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
The White House here going on the offensive, attacking the judge as a legal showdown continues over President Trump's use of a 1978 wartime law to deport suspected gang members. It started Saturday when District Judge James Boasberg ordered deportation flights using the Alien Enemies Act to be halted, an order which did not happen as the White House claims the planes were already over international waters. Since then, the judge has ordered the Department of Justice to turn over flight information for 3 days, looking to determine if the administration deliberately flouted his orders. The final deadline for the documents was today at noon, and joining us now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schonfeld with an update on the legal battle. Zach, while we still don't know whether or not the Justice Department complied, what's next as this case progresses?
Hey, Judy, that noon Thursday deadline has now come and gone, and at least on the public docket, there has been radio silence. Now, it's unclear at this point as to whether the Trump administration has filed something under seal. The judge had told the administration that they could file this flight information privately to him under seal. So it is possible that they did that, but we were really looking for a filing one way or the other today because the judge had told the Justice Department that if they're going to refuse to turn this information over, that they needed to, by noon today, formally invoke what's known as the state secrets privilege, which allows the government to keep some of this evidence secret over national security concerns. So still a bit of a mystery as to what the government decided here. But meanwhile, we are now approaching 2 additional hearings in this case. We're going to have a hearing back in Judge Boasberg's court tomorrow that has been scheduled all week. And then also the administration's appeal is going to an oral argument on Monday. So 2 big hearings coming up as this case progresses, but still mystery on that flight information.
Zach, as you know, the Trump administration has publicly attacked Judge Boasberg, a move that saw a rare rebuke from Chief Justice Roberts this week. When looking at Boasberg's history as a judge, he ordered the government to review the release of Hillary Clinton's emails. He's ruled in favor of President Trump when he declined to force the IRS to turn over the president's tax returns. It doesn't seem like a partisan activist judge.
Yeah, not really. And that, is, if you even look to before he was a federal district judge, he was actually originally appointed as a judge by President Bush to a local court. It was only when he was elevated to the federal bench that he was an appointee of President Obama. I think as you've seen these attacks on judges that have ruled against the Trump administration, there really hasn't been any attention paid to who they were appointed by. You've seen Republicans in Congress even introduce impeachment articles against other judges that have been appointed by Republican presidents when they too have ruled against the Trump administration. So, there certainly is a range of judges, and there certainly are ones who draw the ire of Republicans and have been appointed by Democratic appointees. But Judge Boasberg certainly, as you mentioned, there's some of his history is a bit more complicated.
In other legal news, a federal judge has declined to block DOJ's takeover of the U.S. Institute of Peace. The agency made news after calling police on DOJ employees who refused to leave the building. What does this mean for that nonprofit going forward?
As of now, DOJ is permitted to continue this takeover of the U.S. Institute of Peace. This lawsuit had moved very quickly. There was essentially a same-day hearing on whether to block this takeover attempt. And at the end of this hearing, Judge Beryl Howell, another Obama appointee, rejected the request to block DOJ from taking over the U.S. Institute of Peace. She said that she did have concerns about DOJ's conduct. She actually said as she was handing down her ruling that she was offended by how DOJ had treated the employees at the U.S. Institute for Peace. But she raised concerns at this initial stage of the case that she could grant this emergency relief that was sought by the plaintiff. So, for example, she had raised concerns about the fact that they had sued here in their official capacity. So this case is going to keep progressing, but at least as of now, this is a win for the Trump administration.
Thank you, Zach Schonfeld.
Thanks, Judy.
Social Security is set to see major changes at the end of this month. Beginning March 31st, tighter identity proofing measures will be put in place, requiring millions to visit offices in person or verify online. The policy aimed at reducing fraudulent claims will impact some recipients and new applicants. Over 72 million Americans receive retirement and disability benefits through Social Security. The entitlement program has been in the crosshairs of billionaire Doge leader Elon Musk, who's publicly called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Musk's latest target now has Senate Republicans on edge, as many fear the political blowback that could come with cuts to the program. Joining me now is The Hill's senior editor, Jesse Byrnes, with more. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us. So major changes coming to Social Security. Seems like not a heavy lift to ask Americans to, check ID online or in person. What do we know, though, about the impact especially for older Americans?
Well, Democrats and advocates are definitely sounding the alarm bells, saying that this is really going to put up hurdles for elderly Americans who are trying to get their benefits. They're now having to go in person to verify their bank deposit, to verify their identity. Of course, the Trump administration is trying to argue, well, this is trying to root out fraud, trying to root out millions of dollars in fraudulent claims that are filed every year, because some of this they're able to do it over the phone. But advocates are really warning that this could put up huge hurdles for elderly Americans in particular.
Doge is also expected to close dozens of Social Security field offices. About 26 are expected to close. Many of those are listed in red states. So it doesn't seem like maybe the best political move.
Yeah, and in rural areas, we're talking about Kentucky, North Carolina, Texas, Florida, areas that Trump overwhelmingly won in the last election. And so these are certainly going to have an impact. And, when we take a step back, Social Security and entitlements more broadly, Medicare, Medicaid, have been long viewed as the third rail in politics. And so both parties know they don't want to talk about cuts to them, because it really can come back to bite them on election day. And so we're seeing this more and more from Republicans saying, be careful on talking about this, be careful on trying to advocate for deep cuts in these programs. Elon Musk, he has one agenda. He's trying to cut down the federal government's size, trying to go after these programs. But Republicans are really worried that this could come back to haunt them, especially with the midterms around the corner.
Yeah, on that same note, Elon Musk has called Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme. It says It seems like Senate Republicans, as you mentioned, want Musk to zip it when it comes to entitlement programs, Social Security in particular. Are they scared of the political blowback?
Yeah, and we've seen people like Lisa Murkowski come out a little bit more vocally. Republicans at large are still, they want to talk on background. They don't want to talk about publicly trying to push back on Musk. They're worried about him trying to come after them politically. He's used his social platform X. He's, this threat of primary challengers for Republicans who are kind of walking out of lockstep with the Trump administration. That looms large for many of these lawmakers. But we're starting to see some come on the record saying, this is really worrisome. They don't want deep cuts to Social Security or things that could really impact their constituents.
You mentioned Senator Lisa Murkowski speaking out against Doge and some of these proposed cuts. Let's hear what she had to say earlier this week.
I get criticized for what I say, and then everybody else is like, well, how come nobody else is saying anything? Well, figure it out, because they're looking at how many things are being thrown at me, and it's like, maybe I just better duck and cover. That's why you've got everybody just like zip lip, not saying a word, because they're afraid they're going to be taken down, they're going to be primaried.
It seems like Republicans are doing this kind of balancing act where they want to keep President Trump happy, but they also, want to do okay on Election Day.
Yeah, and the reality is there's a huge war chest coming up for these Republican senators who, Trump, Elon Musk spent, $250 million in the last election to try to get Trump elected, and he has already signaled he's willing to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars again in future elections. And so that specter of that money being used against these incumbent Republicans really looms large for them. And so, we are going to see at least a little bit of daylight with the Senate Republicans versus the House. The House has overwhelmingly been very much in line with Trump's agenda, but we are starting to see some select few Republican senators try to push back.
We are seeing a few Republican lawmakers speak out this week. The Republican chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee issued a rare joint statement criticizing a report that President Trump could drastically change the military combatant structure. Are we starting to see more of these breaking points?
Yeah, and this was a really kind of striking statement because we have someone like Roger Wicker who typically doesn't, send out these type of rebukes of potential changes from the Trump administration, as well as Mike Rogers, his counterpart on the House Armed Services Committee. And this is really the first real example of congressional Republicans pushing back on what the Trump administration is reportedly weighing to do. These lawmakers are worried about certain plans to combine certain combatants. The structure for the U.S. military, there's 11 commands around the world, and they're particularly worried about combining reportedly Africa and Europe, and as well as the European command is a dual role. As you know, he oversees Europe, but he also serves as the Supreme Allied Commander for NATO. That's been a position that's been held by an American going back to Dwight D. Eisenhower in the 1950s. And so to have the Trump administration reportedly looking at having an American step down from that role has big implications, not just for Europe, but for NATO in particular, amid a war in Ukraine still playing out.
Looking ahead to the 2026 fiscal funding, fiscal conservatives want to codify these DOGE cuts. Are you expecting to see some drama between the two chambers coming up?
We've really seen some mixed messaging from Republicans on this. On one hand, you have congressional Republicans trying to codify many of the DOGE cuts. At the other hand, you are seeing some Republicans, at least privately, drawing concerns about some of these cuts in impacting major agencies and major programs. By and large, the appropriators on Capitol Hill are going to try to work in tandem on what they do every year, which is craft these year-long funding plans. But as we know, largely Congress will kind of come back to the end of the last minute and then try to rush through a plan. So we'll see exactly. But the thing to watch in the coming weeks will be President Trump releasing his budget blueprint. And with that, we expect to see him proposing a number of cuts across the federal government, mirroring what DOGE has been trying to do. And we'll see if Republicans try to echo that with their own budget setting in the coming months.
Federal Reserve announcing this week that rates are going to be staying the same. President Trump, of course, has often tried to influence the Fed. Do you think Jerome Powell is setting himself up to be coming back into President Trump's crosshairs here?
Well, he's certainly been in Trump's crosshairs for years now. Going back to his first term, Trump tried to put pressure on Jerome Powell and tried to really find the bounds of the Federal Reserve. Of course, coming into his second term, Trump has pushed back strongly on this. He's advocated for an aggressive rate cutting to essentially offset the inflationary pressure from tariffs. Trump's pushing full steam ahead with tariffs. That's obviously raising concerns about prices going up for Americans. And so Trump now trying to essentially get the lever to go the opposite direction by cutting rates. So we do expect the Fed to they're keeping rates steady right now. We'll see what they do later in the year. But so far, Jerome Powell trying to resist that pressure from Trump.
Jesse Byrnes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Judy.
Illegal border crossings may be at the lowest in decades, but the fight against criminal organizations remains a top priority as Border Patrol Chief Mike Banks sounds the alarm on persistent threats imposed by drug cartels. In recent weeks, we've seen a disturbing trend of cartels planting explosives near the border. One American life tragically lost last month because of it. Border correspondent Allie Bradley has the latest in this News Nation exclusive with the new Border Patrol Chief.
Yeah, Judy, we actually just got information from Chief Mike Banks that a Sinaloa cartel foot guide was arrested in Arizona. Now, he is being charged with a felony for smuggling people into the United States illegally. The Mexican national admitted to working for the transnational criminal organization. And Chief Banks telling us he has a stark warning for the criminal cartels. When they come face to face with them, he said they're not going to hold back. The chief of Border Patrol telling us in an exclusive interview that the threat of the violence spilling over into the United States is very real. We've reported that agents have been alerted of the cartel having permission to fire at law enforcement over here in the United States. We've already seen 2 cross-border shootings since the border was essentially shut down under this administration. We've also seen hundreds of drone incursions, and the violent groups that have been designated as terrorist organizations are even using bomb-wielding drones against rival cartels, which the chief says is causing concern. But they're ready to fight the enemy anywhere, and he says they have the capabilities to do it.
we do have the technology available to counter drones, and we are deploying more of that technology. And yes, you're right, we have seen, cartel on cartel violence that involves drones. We prepare and train to be ready to fight the enemy on any ground. We're impacting the cartel's ability to make billions of dollars, right? And so at what point do they decide that they're ready to push? I can tell you this. Border Patrol is some of the most highly trained, most professional law enforcement agency in the country, and we stand ready to defend the borders, and we're not going to hold back. We are not going to surrender. We will get this border. We will get operational control of the United States border, absolutely.
Now, Chief Banks also says that they are building more infrastructure, which does include more wall. We know that's happening in the Rio Grande Valley sector. And he also said they're going to be adding more of that controversial buoy barrier. Now, that was originally placed in the Rio Grande in the Shelby Park area of Eagle Pass by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, something Chief Banks was instrumental in, as he was Abbott's border czar then. Banks says the buoys are going to be put throughout the Rio Grande, which does include other areas outside of Texas. Take a listen.
Buoy barriers will absolutely be a part of our technology and our infrastructure approach to securing the border under my term as the Chief of the Border Patrol. We're going to continue doing everything we can to impede the ability to cross illegally into the country, and then increase the probability of detection and apprehension if you do make it into the country.
Now, Judy, the Trump administration is pushing for zero crossings, which Chief Banks says is full operational control of the border. Right now, the crossings are historically low. However, they are still seeing some gotaways. They're seeing about 100 a day on average, according to the chief. Those are people who have successfully evaded law enforcement. But you have to compare that to its peak in April of 2023, when they saw over 3,700 gotaways in a single day. Judy?
Allie Bradley, thank you. If you have upcoming vacation plans, you may want to listen extra carefully to this story. The CDC has issued a dengue fever health alert for spring and summer travelers. A record number of dengue fever cases in U.S. travelers has already been reported, with almost 3,500 cases. That's an 84% rise compared to 2024 cases, and they're expected to climb even more. Dengue activity is high in parts of the U.S. like Florida and popular vacation destinations such as the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. The virus is more easily spread during the warmer months and is transmitted when infected mosquitoes bite people. Symptoms include high fever, severe headache, pain behind the eyes, muscle pain, and rash. The CDC recommends wearing long sleeves and insect repellent to avoid mosquito bites, which could lead to the virus. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.